This is Damian Macy, member of the Friends of the Marshall Public Library, and this is on Thursday, August the 6th of 2015, and I am with Cris Fitzjarrald here today as an early resident of Marshall and many years teaching. I think she's probably got some interesting stories to tell us. So with that, Cris, you're on.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1952 on this day. Today's my birthday.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. And I was born in Paris, Illinois. My parents, Carol Bridwell Davidson and Paul Allen Davidson. And then I have 6 siblings, Bud, Sally, Matt, Paula, Elaine, and Candy.
Bridwell.
My mother was a Bridwell. And I had wonderful grandparents, Joe and Anna Davidson, who lived here in Marshall. And then my grandparents, Bridwells, lived in Oliver and ran the general store. Yeah. So that was a big part of my life with my grandparents. I've lived in Marshall all my life except for a 2-year period when our family moved to New Mexico.
Wow. My
dad and some other Marshall people connected with the pipeline that was out west, and we lived there for 2 years in Aztec. And I had 2 siblings born there in Farmington. Sally and Bud were both born in New Mexico. And I have wonderful memories of different family in New Mexico. Don and Joanne Malik, Jackie and Dean Callahan coming to visit with their family, Andy Gorby, just all wonderful, fond memories. And I did go to 1st grade in New Mexico. They did not have public kindergarten then. But I went to 1st grade. I remember my teacher well. Her name was Mrs. Maxson, and the name of our school was Lydia Rippey. And my first day of school was not something I wish to remember, but I remember it well because I did not want to leave my mother and my little sisters and brothers, and I fought hard. But the principal came to know me very well, and so did the teacher, but I had a very good experience once I finally did decide the school was okay.
Were you close enough to school that you could walk?
I vaguely remember walking with my 2 older sisters, Elaine and Paula, so it must have been fairly close. So yes, so that was a big deal too. So I've lived in Marshall all but those 2 years in New Mexico. And then when I graduated high school, of course, I lived away because I lived in Charleston, and my husband and I at the time, we were married before we started college, and we lived in Charleston and went to school there. But Marshall's always been my hometown.
So did you go to high school in Marshall
Yes.
or Charleston?
Marshall.
Marshall.
After I graduated high school, got married, moved to Charleston, and went to Eastern.
Okay.
Graduated there from Eastern with a business degree, teaching. Growing up in Marshall, we lived a few different places. The ones that I remember the most are after we came back from New Mexico. We lived for a short time down on the Zion Road. We rented a house from my Uncle Arch and Aunt Nora Davidson. And then we moved into a home where we lived for 6 or 7 years east of town on Route 40 across from the way station. And those are the biggest memories of my childhood that I have, because the saying that it takes a village to raise a child is so true, especially when you have so many siblings. And we were a poor family. we didn't know it. We were rich in love and care, but we were poor in money. And we had the most wonderful, wonderful neighbors, country neighbors, and church family. We attended Armstrong Church. I have fond memories of Sunday school, Bible school, and all the surrounding families. Helen and Ray Ferris,
Oh, yeah.
Norma and Wayne Schweitzer, Clara and Pete Bartram, Dorothy and Fenton Charlie and Carol Charlie, the Welsh families, Dorothea and David Bland. I mean, I could go on and on about those families. Wonderful, special places in my heart. But our country neighbor was, across the road, was Dick and Wanda Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
And we thought of them like they were king and queen. They were that important and respected by all of us. And we always called Dick our second dad, because as young children, we would wait for him to come home from work to see what activity we could do for the evening or what could we do for the weekend, because we didn't have bicycles. Our bicycles, Dick had used bicycles in his garage. He had a little above ground swimming pool in his backyard. He was kind of our activity director for the country, but we all have very, very fond memories. And I remember growing up, and as I got into adulthood, it's like we always told each other we loved each other. But he pretty much was the only one outside the family that we would say, "I love you, Dick," and he would always tell us he loved us back.
You mentioned living across from the way station. Now, obviously, this would have been before Interstate 70, I think. Mm-hmm. And the major traffic went right down Route 40. Mm-hmm. Was that a noisy and, I guess, disturbing situation or not?
Well, I remember vividly fast traffic on 40. And I remember, especially the summertime, sitting out and playing in the yard and all the busy traffic. And I mean, there were accidents.
Oh my, yeah.
And it was a very, very busy road. And we had to pull from our home when we went into town. We would have to pull onto that busy highway. But, you know, thinking back, I didn't think it was a big deal. But really what was a big deal was the way station across the road. And we loved Sunday afternoons because we knew that Chris Curran would be running the way station, and we could take some coins over there and get a pop out of the machine and sit with Chris at the way station. And we loved the scales, the big numbers on the scales, and if they passed inspection or whatever, he'd let us say okay or whatever into the microphone. Mm-hmm. But those are very fond memories too, sitting at the way station on Sunday afternoons and watching the
Because at that time, trucks, buses, everything went right through downtown Marshall.
Right.
And then it was finally moved out to the new Route 40,
right.
But still all of that traffic was on that road.
Yeah, it was busy. Yeah, it was busy. But the house we lived in was about 5 miles from town. And it might as well have been 50 or 500, because if you were home, you were home. And you had to, we rode the school bus. I have very fond memories of riding the school bus. But we had to find when we were home, we were home. We had to find our own thing to do. We did have chores. We were expected to keep our very small house clean. And speaking of the home, we had no running water, no bathroom facilities. It was outdoor and a pump in the kitchen. But we didn't really know that much different. And that's the way it was, and we all helped out and did our share. And
did you have a particular chore that was yours to do each day?
I just remember we all just, probably the older ones, helped take care of the house, and then we mowed the yard.
Okay.
As we grew older, my dad had a business called Davidson Outdoor Equipment, and it was started when we lived there on 40. He had a little tiny wooden shed, and he sold lawnmowers, and it eventually grew to riding mowers, snowmobiles, bicycles, amphicats. But that was kind of mine and the older siblings, that was kind of our introduction to business. Before that, he had a lawn mowing business, and if you were old enough to push a mower and pull weeds, you did it. So we helped outside the home with that, with our dad's business. So.
Did you have a pet when you were young?
I vaguely remember my two older sisters having a dog in New Mexico for a short time. Its name, I'm pretty sure, was Sandy, and I remember it died. I don't remember, maybe got hit or something. And then the only other dog that I remember having as a family was a stray collie appeared, and I can't believe that Mom and Dad let us keep it. And one of my sisters and I named it Jimmy Scott, which had some meaning to us. But and then I think we had a dog when we lived out on 40. I'm not sure what kind it was, but its name was Chico. And I think we had to get rid of it because it bit like a traveling salesman or somebody that came to our door, which, anyway, but those were our
Well, of course, a pet would be in dire danger along the highway.
Exactly.
Did you have a particular favorite subject in school when you were going to school?
Not in younger years, but as I grew older, I did. In younger years, I had wonderful, wonderful teachers in the Marshall school system, because from second grade on, I was Marshall student. But I fondly remember Miss Ruth Friedenbooker as my second grade teacher, Mrs. Baker and Mrs. Buckner at the Old North School. I remember things like that we didn't normally do, but I can't remember if it was Mrs. Buckner or Mrs. Baker, but they brought in cream, and we shook the butter, shook it and made butter and ate it on crackers, and just special things like that. And then I went back to the Old South School, and Mrs. Heck, Mary Heck, was my fifth grade teacher, and I have very fond memories of her reading chapter books, and I think that really grabbed me and started my love of reading, because just from that time on, I always wanted to check out a book, and I couldn't wait till she read the next chapter and got to the end of the book. And then when I got to high school, really probably Mildred Hutchins and Marilyn Smitley were a big influence, and especially Marilyn Smitley, with me knowing that I love my business subject so much that I wanted to do something related to business. So I really credit Marilyn Smitley as my mentor as far as my choice of career.
And what year of that was in school that you kind of decided, I'm going to go to business?
Well, I was able to be on the work program my senior year, and I worked as an assistant secretary at the Marshall feed store down on Maple and 14th. Yeah. And Evelyn O'Rourke was my supervisor. She was wonderful, wonderful leader, teacher. And Teresa Durst worked there, and she was just a year or so older than me. So, but they were just wonderful people to work with and learn from. So I knew then that I loved the business type of work in an office. But then my senior year, how you all take testing, state testing and everything, and Mr. Deming, Hank Deming, called me into his office one day in the spring and he said, "Would you like to go to college?" And I mean, that was never even thought about. And he said, "Because we've got a scholarship available here." He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I know I want business." And he kind of said, "Well, what about being a business teacher?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, the state of Illinois you have met the requirements to receive a scholarship to go to college to become a teacher." And I just said, "Absolutely." And I took it, and that pretty much set me out on my life's career choice.
And what school did you attend?
I went to Eastern Illinois. Wonderful. And I was a pretty serious student because money was an issue, and I was married young, and my husband was also in college at the time, Woody. And we both, had to work part-time and go to school. And I made it a point to get through as soon as I could. So I went full-time through the school year, through summer school, and just did it as quick as I could and graduated in 3 years.
In 3 years? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you have some student teaching in that pattern, or that program that you had to participate in?
I did, and I hadn't even thought about that, but I did my student teaching in Paris at the Paris High School with Mary Ida Riddell, Mrs. Riddell, and so I was fairly young doing my student teaching with all these high school kids, but it was a challenge in that I lived in Charleston and commuted, and she had high expectations, which I look back and think how wonderful that was and how hard I worked to please her and get my job done. Darlene Stone, Pennington now, was also another teacher that I had at Paris High School that I think I had a couple of classes with Darlene and then the rest of them with Mary Ida. But one of the big things I remember about student teaching is my transportation to get to Charleston and back and forth from Charleston to Paris. And there was a young group of teachers that lived in Charleston that taught there in different elementary schools. I don't know how I found out about them, but they let me tag along as a student teacher, and I paid so many dollars a week, and we all traded rides by the week, and it was a really good experience because in 1972, 73, I didn't have my own vehicle. We shared, my husband and I shared, and I didn't have one that I could drive every day. So.
Did riding with those other teachers, you kind of get some information too of what teaching's all about?
I did. They were all elementary teachers, but I saw what they brought home every day, what they took back, and I didn't know at the time what an influence they had on me.
I wonder.
So, but they all loved their jobs. They were excited about it. They were young teachers, and they were hard workers. So they all.
Out of curiosity, have you kept in touch with any of them, or do you know where they are today?
It's kind of sad. And I think all the people I've met and made friends with through all my life, and I'm thinking, why haven't I kept close contact? And I have certain friends that I've met over life, those few close friends that you do hold on to, but I have so many that I have lost touch with.
Well, I think we all have say, well, I'm going to, I will.
I know.
And we get involved in other things and just don't.
I know. And then I think, I've been blessed with 6 siblings, and those are my good friends. you know, and it's like you don't realize how much time, family time, and those are like good friend times too.
So you graduated from EIU,
Right.
Eastern Illinois.
Right.
In what year was that?
In 1973.
73.
And there was no business. I knew I wanted to stay in the Marshall area, and there were no business positions open within a nice driving distance. So the reason I got a business degree was if I don't get to teach, I'll work in an office. And so I was able to apply and get on with Ford Motor Credit, which had an office here in town. And I worked at Ford Motor Credit for 5 years in a professional position. Wonderful people that I worked with, and bosses, and it was just a great learning experience. It was probably a good transition from college to teaching to classroom because of what I gained from that job, I think.
Was that work more accounting oriented?
At the time, I didn't really think about it, but it was definitely accounting oriented. You know, dealing with numbers, whether it was helping a dealership sell a car to a customer and get it financed, or customers coming in, making payments. I mean, we dealt with a lot of money from a lot of different sources, and I didn't really think about it at the time, but now that I look back, it was definitely accounting related.
Well, I'm looking at that year too. There was probably kind of, quote, an introduction to computers at that time.
Oh, yeah. I remember our office, the first office was located out where Terry Weir has his business, Country Companies.
Oh, yeah.
Now. And it was, well, in that building. And I remember when I started, we may have had a computer, but I remember the changes over the years and how we would deal with Dearborn, Michigan, and have to talk to the technical guy and fix our own computers if there was a glitch. And I was fortunate enough to be able to, they sent me to Dearborn, to the Ford office
Interesting experience.
to learn about the new system they were going to introduce, and then I had to come back and train the other employees of the office. So
you went early computer with
it was early. Yeah, it was early.
Were they in the process of converting most of their record of keeping and paperwork to computer, or did that take a long time to
It took a long time. It took a long time, because when I left in 1978, that's when I got my teaching job, we still had files and files and files. You know, you still kept a personal customer paper file, a personal dealership paper file. I mean, it was still paper, but gradually it was changing to all computer.
Do you think that's a good change or a bad one?
Well, it has to be good because it's happened, right? I don't know.
I don't know, they keep talking about computers reducing paperwork, but I really think sometimes that good old paper file, going to a folder, you can get it and get it about as fast as trying to go through a computer process.
I know.
As a business teacher, you might disagree with me.
Well, you know, as a business teacher, I saw major changes. I mean, when I started teaching I taught typing as one of the classes, and it was manual typewriters. I can't imagine teaching a child on a manual typewriter today. I mean, you had to have some strong fingers. But, and then electric, and then they use the term electronic, and then after electronic, then computers. So I saw lots of changes over the years as a teacher.
Someone I know has an office, this was a couple of years ago, and they still used a computer. I mean, a manual typewriter.
Oh.
It was an electric one, but it was a typewriter. And this young couple was in the office with their child, and the child said to his mother, "What's that?" And I find that hard to believe.
No, oh, absolutely. I mean, even before I retired in 2012, and toward the end of my teaching career, we had like an electronic typewriter. There would have been one in the library, one at different places, and the students, they wanted to use it like to fill out a form. They had no idea how to put the paper in, how to, what to do. I mean, that's what we've become. It's definitely a computer society.
And of course, they came along with the self-correcting typewriters, which were a big giant movement ahead.
Yeah, right.
In your teaching starting in 1978, I think you said here, is when and that was at the Marshall?
At Marshall High School. I started in the fall of 78, so my first graduating class was class of 79. And I think now those kids are older than I am. Whoops, but not really. Time has a funny way of passing by, and you meet someone and it's like, oh my goodness, that was one of my students,
Did you get into second generations?
Oh, absolutely. And the kids do not like being called by a parent's name. No. When they look exactly like their parent did, they don't like that. Yeah.
In your teaching career at all, and that number of years, did you find a great deal of change, not just in the mechanical, but the change in teaching and philosophies?
I did. It seemed, I don't know when it happened, but it seemed when I first started teaching in the 70s, there was still kind of a separation, between home and school. Like they had something going, like when they went home, there'd be somebody there. But as time went on, it's like, and I taught high school kids, so I didn't teach little ones. But as time went on, it's like you might have a permission slip that you needed, if you want to go on this field trip or whatever, we need this signed. Well, my mom, or I won't see my mom or my dad until Thursday night or Friday or whatever. Things like that, but it was a testament that not only was the man working, the woman was working too. And we got into different shifts that they were working, and and then the child had their school time. So sometimes it was hard. I saw that kind of change, and then I also felt like as time went on, of course, I loved all my kids, all my high school kids, all my students. I felt like I was getting information shared with me that wouldn't normally be shared with because they needed someone to talk to. And I felt like that was kind of with the times, If mom and dad were busy working, they didn't get talk about something they needed to talk about, and here was a teacher, and you had that teacher's attention. So I kind of saw that change too over time.
But hasn't there been a tremendous change too in more single-parent homes?
Yeah, there.
And that would be part of that communications if mom was working.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But I love the small town of Marshall, and that everybody pretty much knows everybody else, and people will take care of whatever needs taken care of. And I think our students sometimes don't realize how fortunate they've been to be a product of the Marshall school system.
Now, I know you taught business, and business covers quite a range of different things. Was there a particular favorite part of that business curriculum that you enjoyed most?
As a young teacher, I loved, and this is a thing of the past too, I loved teaching shorthand. Loved it, loved it, loved
I'm
it.
going to ask you about that.
Yeah, loved it. And I don't know how many methods of shorthand I taught. I taught Greg shorthand. I can't even think. But when I finished, I taught like 3 or 4 different methods. It was called, it was like note-taking or alpha shorthand. It was a shortened version. It's like the kids' text now, except you were handwriting. You leave out the middle vowel. You don't capitalize. That's what shorthand turned to. And now texting is shorthand. All their abbreviations, that is a form of shorthand. But really, as I finished up, probably accounting was my favorite.
Really?
I love teaching accounting. Loved it. Loved the kids that got excited about doing a problem and getting the right answer the first time, or else finding their mistake and celebrating because they found their own mistake.
And the debits always have to equal the credits.
I had a lot of fun with all my classes. I just thoroughly enjoyed teaching teenagers.
Have you found out or kept track of seeing how many of them went on to study business in college or went into to business?
I used to.
It'd be hard to do.
I had great plans at one time. I was going to keep track, and it's difficult. But there are kids that have gone on to business and done well, and it's fun to see, that they got maybe just this little tiny excitement at Marshall High School, and it's like, well, maybe I should do something related to that. But
you feel that the ones that, and not just your students, but Marshall School in general, were well prepared then for their avenue of college education?
Well, I felt like I was, and I would hope, that students feel that way. I think a lot of time it's great if a young person can find what they're passionate about at a young age, so they can pick classes that match up to that. It's kind of sad when you get to be a senior in high school and don't really know what you like, because in life you want to choose something that you like to do because you're going to spend a lot of time working at it, and you better like it. So, getting out of high school not knowing what you want to do, going to college not knowing, it's hard. That would be hard for a young person. And it happens. We see it happen. But hopefully along the way something clicks and they can.
Cris, was there a particular teacher or event or something that kind of made you click and say, hey, I want to go into business, and I want to study that field?
Well, I had said earlier that Marilyn Smitley.
Yeah.
I remember very well Mildred Hutchins as my typing teacher. And, but I would say Marilyn Smitley for my career choice. When I first started teaching, I was very fortunate to have Sally Rector as my close coworker, and Dorothy Meehan was still there teaching. So they were great coworkers to help me get started as a business teacher. And I shared a classroom. I had to, as being the third business teacher, there were 2 business rooms, so I had to kind of travel around. And a big part of my time, I shared a classroom with Bill Wyke. So I went over to social studies and taught,
excuse me,
and taught consumer education in Bill Wyke's classroom. So that was a treat.
In your moving around to classrooms and all, did you find out that there were some students who really, maybe even that were studying business, and this may really not be the career for them to follow?
I think it was good that a student would elect to take a business class, and I think they could pretty much decide, because business was always pretty much elective. Those were classes, vocational classes that weren't, math, science, English, yeah. So if they took that class and hated it or didn't do well in it, I think that was pretty much the message that maybe they should choose something else.
Would you think maybe some of them should have had a required class because balancing a checkbook, and there's so many basic things that students come out of school and they really are not aware of how to do that.
Is what consumer education did. I taught that for 6 years, and then there's also, I'm not sure what it's called now. It's like an economics class where they teach those basic personal business topics that, you're going to have to deal with in life. Which I taught business math the last few years of my teaching, which it was an elective class, but it focused on credit cards, checking accounts, all that type of business matters that I love teaching that too.
And that has changed. If you were teaching that class today, right now we've got all of this identity theft and all of these things. How would you approach that?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. My philosophy is, if you don't need to share the information, don't do it. Because a lot of times people ask for it, they don't have to have it. So just be careful about who you share your information with, is what I would say, definitely.
Cris, has there been an event or a world situation or a local situation that has just maybe changed your life or given you a different thought process?
Well, I'm trying to think. I can think of 3 things that kind of stand out in my mind. Okay. When I was young, I was in 6th grade when Kennedy was assassinated. And I remember having the TV on in the classroom. And Mrs. Beals was my 6th grade teacher. It was in the Old North School building. And praying there in school. And I remember going home and watching those events on our small black and white TV at home. I remember that, and then I remember there were other, major historical events, but I remember when 9/11, I was the school work coordinator, and I had left school that morning to go check on a student that was working with the city of Marshall. And I had checked in with him. I had my radio on in my car, and I heard the announcer, and I thought, what's going on? And then I kept hearing more things, and I got back to school, and I met up with a couple teachers in the hallway and realized that there was really something bad going on. I mean, that day kind of clicks in my mind. And I don't know, there were just different things over the years that
it seemed like in what I've read, those 2 events, just about everyone can remember where they were and what they were doing.
Yeah.
In the period of education and with our school systems today, they're even coming back now with some things you don't have to take the cursive writing. Do you think there's some things that just don't make sense in education today?
I think handwriting is important. I think if you write something down, someone else should be able to read it. And I have gotten horrible. But I was watching something recently. Someone was pushing getting a penmanship class back in the school system. I seriously don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I don't know that I would change anything about the educational system. Just the fast pace of keeping up with technology is enough to keep teachers busy learning what's new, you know.
And it's always changing.
It's always changing. You better be ready.
With the, I guess, having lived in Marshall most of your life and thinking back as a child, obviously in those years there were a lot more retail stores and stuff.
Oh my
like
goodness.
that. But is there significant changes in Marshall that you particularly remember? Or businesses that you frequented then that you kind of miss?
You know, just looking down Main Street, one of my siblings and I all babysat. That was our first money outside the home, was babysitting. I mean, we had babysitting jobs whenever we wanted. But other than that, working at Caldwell Notion, the dime store owned by Bill Caldwell and his parents, I had 2 sisters and I worked there during the summer on vacations. What a wonderful, wonderful family. And I can still just see the store in my mind, the candy bins, feeling so privileged that the Caldwells wanted me at the register. You know, they trusted me to give the right change and take care of the customers. Saturday night was a hopping time at the dime store because husbands and wives would get dressed up, come downtown Marshall, shop. They would always come and browse the aisles at the dime store, go down to Martin's Drugs, Blankenship Drugs, whatever stores were open. I mean, that was a big deal on Saturday night. I remember when the store closed, whoever was working was responsible to clean. Make sure the shelves and everything was organized and every inch of that carpet was swept. I had wonderful, wonderful coworkers, Lois Norton, Fern Tohill, Doris Burnham, and then of course my sisters that worked in there, and Bill and his parents were so good to us. So I have fond memories of that.
How many employees were working at that time, do you recall?
Oh, not that many. Like if Bill was working, there would probably be maybe 2 of us. Mm-hmm. But I also, the Candy Kitchen on the south side of Archer Avenue was always a hopping spot on Saturday night. It was called Teen Center. And there was always a local band from the Wabash Valley. A local band would play. And you went to dance and have fun, hang out with friends, and go cruising, if you could. And the cruising, whoever had the license, the cruising was you would go south of town to Dog and Suds, go slowly around, see who was there, head up North Michigan, go to Tasty Freeze, cruise around. And this was the time when they had the microphones. They took your order from outside, or else somebody walked out of the business and came to your car and asked you what you wanted. But the Tasty Freeze and the Dog and Suds and Teen Center were the happening spots.
Did any of those have roller skate delivery when they brought out the mugs? And
I don't remember that. I don't remember that they did, but they may have. I don't remember. I had at least one sister that worked at Tasty Freeze, and I know she didn't, but yeah, those were fun times.
The stores downtown, you mentioned a couple of them.
Oh God.
The Rademakers, do you remember their ice cream?
I remember their grilled cheese. I don't know why, but or like ham and cheese grilled, and just the getting a drink at the fountain or whatever. And I remember Martin's Drugs had the fountain, and that was a big deal to after school to walk downtown, sit with your friends, look at a magazine, and order a cherry Coke. It was a Coke with cherry flavor added to it. And looking at all their makeup, Mush and Rose, which turned into Wallace Jewelry. I mean, that's where we got all of our, that's where you got your class ring, that's where charm bracelets were a big thing. You know, you would start a bracelet, and for birthdays and holidays, you wanted a charm to add to that bracelet. I mean, I'm sure they sold lots of engagement rings and wedding rings, and that was the jewelry spot. And then over the years, we've had lots of nice clothing stores. Hedges, Finkbeiners, upstairs where Larry Woodard, where the radio station is, for some years, Keller's from Martinsville had a little boutique shop up there, clothing boutique. But we've had different nice clothing stores over the years downtown Marshall. Shoe store, Grabenheimer's shoe store, and then Finkbeiners opened their clothing department store. But yeah, Marshall Main Street, there used to be a bargain store, different little variety store type here on the north of the courthouse.
Something that has always amazed me was the number of small mom and pop grocery stores there used to be.
Oh my gosh, I have fond memories.
Everywhere.
The grocery store memories I have, the first one would have to be Weaver Store out on 40 on Weaver Road. Doris Lilly. That was wonderful. Well, it was within a distance where we could walk or ride a borrowed bike from our neighbor Dick down to the store and spend our few cents and then go back home. So Weaver Store, and then
Poorman's had a store.
Poorman's had a store, Blizzard Grocery, Siverly's Fruit Market, Marshall Foreigns on 2nd Street, Selma George on the corner of 2nd, South 2nd, which is now, it was the medicine shop, and now it's a title company, I think. I mean, there were all kinds of small, wonderful grocery stores.
And Harlow's had a store down on the south. And there was a Venarsdale up on
Yes,
Route 1.
that's right. They were kind of out of our walking distance. So it depended on like if we were with my grandmother, it was Siverly's, Blizzard's, and Poorman's. If we were at home out on West Archer Avenue, it was Marshall Foreign's or Selma George's that we went to.
I think it goes back to the point of the times. Many people did not have a car, as you mentioned.
Right.
And the grocery stores were within walking distance.
Right.
So people could get their bread, milk, groceries, or whatever, and walk back and take it back home.
Exactly. And I'm sure there were enough of us kids in the family that we probably loved running that errand for our mom or our dad.
Yeah.
And we would walk and get it and bring it back home.
Might even nibble on something along the way.
Right. Well, speaking of Main Street, when we lived in the country out on 40, we didn't have washing or dryer. So we would bring our laundry into town, and there used to be a coin laundry where the fire station is. Ray Bill Forsyth and his wife ran that, and I remember spending lots and lots of time in there doing our laundry, and they were such nice people. Nice people. Whoever you did business with, you became like friends with.
Almost family in some cases.
Right.
With all of and you mentioned modern conveniences, with all the things we have today, is there something you could come down and say, I just could not live without that?
Well, I think of growing up, and I'm thinking running water, indoor bathroom, and a washer and dryer. I mean, who could live without that? I don't have a dishwasher, and people come into my house and say, I can't believe. And it's like, you know what? I can stand at my kitchen window and look out and see trees and birds, and I don't need that.
And the dishes still get clean.
Yes, that's something I can live without.
Okay. If you were talking to someone, say you traveled over to Europe somewhere, and you want Marshall, where's Marshall, or what's that all about? What would you tell them about Marshall? What might be a good place to visit, or maybe even come here to stay?
Well, I love that it's a small community and that people care for each other. And just the rich history that we have here in our small town, from like the historic buildings. I love to hear about, who was the original owner of that building, what was there, just the history we have with, Marshall was important in travels. When somebody needed to stop and rest, or, I love the idea that it's a small town, it's a beautiful town, people care about each other, we have a great school system, it's a wonderful place to raise a family, get to know your neighbors, we have wonderful churches in our community, and I would never have chosen anywhere different. As I grew up, I'm thinking, there's no way I want to leave Marshall, I just knew that I wanted to stay here. Now that I'm older and could possibly move away, there is no way I would. This is where my family is now, my girls, my grandkids, my mom, I've got siblings here. I do have siblings that live away, and they're fun to visit, but I would never leave Marshall.
This is home.
It's home. For sure.
You mentioned retirement, and you've been retired now a few years. Mm-hmm. Were there any hobbies that you had back as a youngster that you're still participating in and that may be fun in your retirement?
Well, I love to read, and I love working outside, gardening, yard work, and I like helping other people do projects. So I keep really busy, and I've joined some committees here in Marshall that I'm excited about, and
a lot of volunteerism.
It is a volunteer community. People just step out and volunteer. I think it's because it's a small community, and they see the need so close that they're willing to step out and do the volunteering. So.
Well, Cris, it's been a delight visiting with you. I appreciate you bringing some of the things of the past. And I think somewhere this whole interview is not for today or tomorrow or next year, but really it's going to be here for people in the future, and is documenting our history. And probably someone's going to come along and say, gee whiz, I didn't know that about Cris. Yeah. So it's been fun visiting with you, and we really appreciate your taking your time out and participating in the program with us.
Okay.
And keep enjoying that retirement.
Okay, thank you very much.